All right, welcome everyone. We're here for another episode of After School of the Admins. I'm Marco Torillo, and I'm here with my co-host,
Des Caldwell. So excited. We got two amazing educators with us today. In full disclosure, this group right here, this quartet, we are known as the Bourbon Bros. You will not get to experience some of our bourbon moments, but we have known each other for quite a while. And so I'm going to introduce Jamie Harris. And Jamie, welcome.
Thanks.
We also need to introduce Adam Johnson.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. Thank you, Des and Marco and Jamie. Thanks for being here. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. We're glad to have you here. Now, Jamie, we would love to know your path, your journey to education and educational leadership.
Sure. So initially, I was never going to be an educator. When I was in high school, I had aides and special ed teachers who worked with my sister telling me, oh, you should be a special ed teacher. You're so good with kids who have those kinds of needs. And I was never going to do that. It did not seem like anything that was realistic for my future. I ended up going into higher education for a couple of years after college. And then that didn't really resonate with me. I was moving furniture for a little while, got laid off from that, and then wound up getting a job working basically as a data collection para at a self-contained school for kids with autism. And I was working with 18 to 21-year-olds with what was then called severe profound autism. And so going through that and then some subsequent experiences in kind of lifespan service providing agencies, got my master's in special education, became a special ed teacher, did that for a while, was in Waterbury, was in Hartford. And then while I was there, became an assistant principal. And now I've been an assistant principal for about 10 years.
Awesome. Adam, how about you? Well, how did you go through your educational journey?
I'll start like Jamie. I think it actually really begins in high school for me. I think an important thing about my kind of whole story is that I was just really not a good student in school, in middle school or in high school. In seventh grade, my seventh grade assistant principal stood over me on the last day of school. And I needed to draw the geography of the United States of America, more or less, like the rough shape of the country for him to decide whether or not I would be promoted to eighth grade that year or not. At least that's what they told me. In high school, I then was, I think, always thought of as being smart, but I was like a C minus D plus student, right? And so really never motivated. I liked politics. I liked social issues. I had a lot going on at home throughout that whole time. And I think that's probably, looking back on it, something that really shaped me. And I think it's taken me a really long time to understand that. But all of this to say is that I barely got into college. I got accepted to the college that I went to conditionally. And my first semester in college, I needed to take a study class. I needed to meet weekly with a mentor. And I hated that. At the time, I had a girlfriend who was on a full ride to the nearby prestigious state university. And I really wanted to impress her, and I really wanted to do better. And so for whatever reason, when I got to college, that's when things like really turned on for me. And so I really just fell in love with learning. And I was a history major. And at that time, I didn't know whether I wanted to be like a Wolf Blitzer style political journalist. Or I really liked working with kids. I also, had like summer camping and so on in my background. And so kind of my love of history and social issues, and then my love of working with kids made me really want to go into teaching. I also knew that before I went into teaching, I knew that I was very consumed with issues of what at the time we called inequality. Right. So educational inequality was really the terminology that was kind of most used at the time. Right. And we were all really excited about reading books by like Jonathan Kozol and Jonathan Taylor Gatto and people like that. And so I knew before I became a teacher that I had a lot of questions that I wanted answered before I became a teacher. And so I actually, when I graduated college, I had done my student teaching. I was certified to be a teacher, but I actually went straight to graduate school. And I had a couple of great options, but I ended up going to the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And I don't say this to like sound braggadocious or whatever, but like for me, it was a big deal to go from being conditionally accepted to college to then going to Harvard for graduate school. And it really, I think, helped me to kind of transform my identity as a scholar and as somebody who was very serious about the field and as somebody who really cared very deeply about this field. And so I was fortunate to go to Harvard, and my graduate advisor there was, you may know the name, Pedro Noguera. And Pedro Noguera was my graduate advisor and my boss, and my, I worked for him. We had a large research project going on. And he was a real mentor to me, and he really, was a great person to learn under, and his doctoral students and so on were all great people to learn under. I learned a tremendous amount that year. And one of the most important things that I think I learned is that it was important for me, essential for me to go teach. And so that's when I left grad school. There was a lot of encouragement for me to stay and like do a doctorate there. And I just felt very inauthentic. And so I said, no, I'm going to go teach. And I very specifically said, I'm going to go teach in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm going to go teach in our capital city. I'm going to go back to Connecticut, and then I'm going to teach in, very specifically, it was my intention to say I'm going to work in, not an easy school to work in. And so I got my first teaching job at Quirk Middle School in Hartford, and I was there from 2002 to 2004. And it was really hard. I did not know what the heck I was doing. I did not know how to teach. There was lots of great people who I worked with there. The principal is somebody who I still very much consider a mentor, Amador Mojica. But that was a challenging situation. And so it was actually after 2 years of teaching there that I was able to transfer to one of the local brand new magnet schools that was just opening up. It's worth saying at this point, actually, that's actually when Marco and I began teaching together. So this was at, a magnet school, and this was right around 2004, 2005. And, we started up a magnet school together. That was a situation that happened under a really bold level of vision, and also a strong level of resources that had not been the case in my previous teaching experience, right? So throughout this time period, I just really remember being, really thoughtful about everything that I had learned in graduate school. And then also, kind of seeing these kind of systemic and political kind of inequalities that were showing up in the school system. And so I knew that that was something that was interesting to me and that I cared about. Time went on. I remained a teacher there. I started doing my next degree, my educational administrator's degree. And I had hoped that at some point in the school that I was working in, maybe an assistant principal's position would open up. And at this time in Hartford, there was a new superintendent, Stephen Adamowski, who came in with a very, very bold and sweeping kind of school reform vision for the city. And my then principal came to me, and he showed me this piece of paper, and he said, "You should apply for this." And I looked at it and I was like, "What?" And at the time I was 28, and my first child was about to be born. And I had only been a teacher for 5 years, and I had really not thought about being a principal. But I applied, and I went through a pretty rigorous screening process. And they decided to go with me. They decided to go with me as the principal for what would be a small themed academy within Hartford Public High School. So I hope it's okay to say that, all four of us eventually at some point worked at Hartford Public High School in some form or fashion. Des, you and I actually never worked together there, but we, kind of in different iterations of time, both, were there. So it's something that we have in common. So the context was that in 2008, in March, I was hired. I came out of the classroom at Classical Magnet School. That was hard. It was really hard to leave my students because I really loved being a teacher. And I went to Hartford High, where everyone was being fired. So everyone at Hartford High at the time was losing their job. Every single person was basically said, you are losing your job. And, they were then applying to be rehired at the school, or they would be reassigned somewhere else based on seniority. And so I was able to basically go around, observe classes, meet with people, and choose who I wanted to hire. So in addition to hiring existing people from Hartford Public High School, I also interviewed people from outside of the school, and basically was able to kind of handpick and hire and build a team. And this all happened when I was 29, right? So I had just kind of turned 29 at that point. And it was a really wild thing to think about. And I'll kind of pause for a second to just, say, maybe we can talk more about that time in Hartford if it's relevant, just because each of us may have different, perspectives. But suffice it to say, about 5 years after that, I was ready for a transition. And so that's actually around 2017 is when I eventually, 2013 is when I eventually left that school system for a local, different school system that operates magnet schools. And I went there for 3 years for a central office position. And then 3 years after that, a principalship opened up at one of the schools. And that's actually where I've been now, going into my 9th year. So I'm principal. I hope it's fine to say I'm principal at the Crack Academy of Aerospace and Engineering in Windsor, Connecticut. We're a 6 through 12 magnet school with just about 800 students, about 120 employees. And, we're getting ready right now. Here it is. It's kind of, late August, mid-late August here. And we're getting ready to start the school year. And so my head is very much in, what matters about this school and what are we going to do this year?
Thank you. So I found it interesting because Des and I have talked about this in one of our former podcasts. How many individuals never had their mind on wanting to be educators before they ended up in education? And it's the individuals who care most about education are the ones who did not want to do it when they first started. Had no want. It was something that helped start to veer them into that path, right, to realize that they have something to be an educator. So I always find that interesting to hear, you were not looking for, you were struggling in education itself. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? To hear that, to go from barely getting through to college to graduating from Harvard, it's a different feel. And you kind of see those experiences and changes. You think of your family's life experiences and how that started to mold you into the person that you became as an educator. It's always fascinating to hear how people get into the field and why they get into the field from it. Hearing that and kind of hearing those past experiences, and absolutely, we all worked in a former district together, and we all had different experiences in that former district, determining on the schools we worked at, determining on the grade levels we were at, time periods, even all of that comes into play because we all saw a numerous amount of things, and we can kind of bring to it some of it to what we bring to our next areas. We are about week. Some people are coming up on it 2 weeks before school starts. What is on your mind right now of the things to go through to make sure that you are prepared to open those doors and to give the students their most positive experience that they need?
That's that, yeah.
Sure. So right now I have new student orientation coming up next week. And so I'm thinking a lot about what is kind of the organizing structure and the climate and the culture of the school that we are continuing to work to build. And so, really being really intentional about thinking through those aspects to kind of create and cultivate an experience for students in a half a day that gives them not only the nuts and bolts of what it will be like to be in the high school for the first time, but also to give them an introduction to kind of the philosophy of what our school is and how we do business. So it's not just, the bell schedule and the locker combos and staying on the right side of the hallway and where the bathrooms are, right? It's also how you navigate those things, and, embedding current students in the process is a really integral part of that. And so just thinking through, how we bring the spirit of the school year up a couple of weeks and give kind of an appetizer for what's going to come. That's what's living in my brain right now.
Absolutely. Des?
So for me, I'm going into year 4 in my current building. And we have done, I think, some really amazing things with really starting to change the culture in the building. We know that culture is impacted, not changed, but we've been impacting it for 3 years, and it's feeling like a different place, which is great. And so this year is really, in my mind and my team's mind, it really feels like the make or break year. Like we've built the systems, we have set the foundation, and now it's time to really make the leaps. And so I've been thinking about our teacher episode, and really the conversations we had with those amazing teachers, and really trying to balance the necessity, the urgency of the work that we need to do this year, with not overwhelming my staff in those first few days, but also recognizing like those first few days that they return are integral for hitting the ground running and really setting the tone for this school year. And so we've got some really big things. We've got some pretty significant changes underway. But at the same time, I don't want people showing up day one and feeling so overwhelmed that it kills the excitement of we're back. We just want our kids in front of us, because, I've been here all summer long, minus Mondays and Fridays, because I don't work Mondays and Fridays over the summer. I suggest you don't either. But that excitement, I've had a chance to like spread that excitement out over the summer and build it, and I don't want them to come back day one and it's like, what, we're doing all this? Like, how are we ever going to? And so really trying to plan and navigate that in my mind. But there's a level of excitement that comes with like knowing that like this is it. Like this is what is going to separate us, and this is the change that we have been building towards. So I'm excited about that.
That's awesome. Adam?
I think very similar to Des and everything that you just said. The biggest things that are on my mind right now, I think, are about tone setting for the school year. So certainly that begins with my staff, right? So our staff are coming back. Our brand new teachers start on Monday. We began admin PD today. So all of our admins were together today, and we'll be together tomorrow, kind of like thinking about our work as a district. Monday, we begin something called Teacher Academy, where all of our brand new teachers are in on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then all of our returning staff, our full staffs, will be at school starting on Thursday. And we begin, speaking, for my school, we begin very much with kind of like a, who are we? Where are we? What are we trying to do here? Kind of an investment in what is our purpose? What is our intention? Why do we exist? And how can we best do this? So I think about that in terms of like kind of like what's immediately in front of me. The other thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about is just my role. So like I said, my school is just under 800 kids. I have for a long time been known as a principal who knows, I know everybody. I know every single child. I know every single child, and I often know a lot about them, and I remember their faces and so on. But in the scale of my school, I have to really balance how much I am working through people and through systems and through structures, and making sure that teams of people are functioning a certain way, and making sure that systems are functioning a certain way, and making sure that my administrative team and my team leaders and my department team leaders and all of those different systems and so on are functioning maximally. And balancing, I think, my own energy to say, when do I engage in my personal relationships and my personal interactions and my personal work, versus when do I really make sure that I'm working through people. And I'm trying to be, I feel like I'm always trying to be better at both of those things. The kids at my school, I think, want to see more of me. And I also just feel like as a just a constantly evolving leader, that that's a big balance that I try to strike, is when do I insert myself and do things kind of individually, versus when am I working systematically.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest things I think we always think about is how do we evolve at the same exact time with our school, with our staff, because we do a lot of talk always about what we want to see our staff become, we want to see our students become. I think sometimes we put ourselves on the outside of that and not push ourselves to do that evolution also. That has been a conversation my own admin team have been having this year, of really trying to step away from the reins, like still having an idea of what's happening in the building, still being there, like helping to facilitate when it needs, but really putting the teachers, putting the staff members in the driver's seat of the professional learning, in the committees. Like, we are there, but we are there as participants, no longer as the leaders of it. We are part of the way I always kind of called them is like the round table. Like, think of it like it's not King Arthur anymore. It's like when we sit at this table, we're all equals. Let's make sure that we do it this way, and we sit back and allow others to take that lead for it. I know for myself right now, it's been really vision and mission. We always have that written down. We've done a lot of work, but I don't know if staff, students, if I were to ask them what is our vision and our mission of our school, if they can answer that question. They know all the work we're doing. They know why it's important. They see the through line to it. They're seeing the successes of it. But I don't know if they could say that this is it. This is what we do here. And I think that's kind of been my push, I think, for this year, is I really want to make sure that if I go around and ask, like I'm not expecting people to go and like recite the exact lines of it word for word, but if they can get those 3 words that we have always written inside of it, of just being relevant, responsive, and rigorous, I want to make sure that's that kind of the statement that we can say we understand what our curriculum is. And when we talk about our expectations of our kids, can they name those 3 expectations that we have, or I should say for our entire school community, not just the kids. So I think for me, that's been what's been weighing on my mind for all the work, kind of setting the table for the school year, which we all know we've all done. We've been setting up since the minute the last day ended. Though we take our breaks here and there, we have already started to work on whatever your summer task list is, or professional learnings are, or whatever. You've already started that process. That has been my focal point, is making sure that staff will be able to say that and students will be able to say those pieces, and because that will then link it back to why we're doing all this work and being able to notice that. So I think that's been a key component for me. Thinking about those things that we've just talked about, like, what's on your mind. And I from knowing each of you the same way that I think of it, you're treating it like chess. So you're already thinking 4 steps ahead of what's happening. What are some of those pitfalls or those struggles you have in your mind? Because we do know that 2 of our individuals here have a lottery system, and determine much of your budget can fall onto those aspects of it, of those kids not coming to your school, what's happening for it. For ourselves, we have to always think about what's coming for staff, for students. What do we need to worry about, not worry about? Is anything changing that we need to go? As we always have, the educational culture changes at a dime, and then we have to be able to adapt with it. What are some of those things that right now are part of your thought process that you're planning for in case?
So for me, I am a believer that we can only impact the things we can impact. right? Like we have to understand the things that are outside of our control and try to not focus on those things. I am coming up against things that are outside of my control that are making it difficult for me to be planful and be and just be there for my students in the way that I typically am. And the reason I'm saying this is something that's really fresh on my mind. I just had a conversation with someone in my building who was able to connect with a kid who pretty much stopped coming to school. And we were just unable, like we couldn't figure it out. This was not a kid who missed the type of days that this student was missing. And it turns out that there was a very real immigration scare with this student's family. And this student was worried that coming to school, like essentially the school couldn't keep the student safe. And, you know, we definitely tried to message families and students, and we definitely, you know, put up things on walls. We made phone calls home. We tried to hold Zoom meetings for families so they could hear from us, you know, our plans for keeping their children safe. But if you don't hear it or you don't believe it, you know, it becomes, you know, fight or flight. And this student, who was by all measures a really strong student, a good kid. And not to say that, you know, I don't believe that, oh, there are bad kids, but this is a kid that there isn't anyone who wouldn't want this kid in their classroom, right? This kid shows up to my office without a pass. You still are going to get to meet with me because there's a reason, right? And to find out that, you know, this is what is impacting this kiddo, like, I don't know how to plan for that. I don't know how to plan for the next email or memo or tweet or, you know, whatever news story that comes out that is completely going to strike fear in the hearts of my community. And how I can say, hey, I'm one of those institutions that historically and systematically have been an agent of oppression, but trust me and send your precious child to me anyway. And I hope that I am building relationships with families, and that is a focus that I have right now, but I don't know that I can plan for things that just seem so ludicrous that I would say there's absolutely no way that could be something that I would have to plan for, and then something happened. So that's has been in the back of my mind for, you know, the better part of a year now.
Adam.
Well, I forgot what the original question was, but if you can remind me about the question. But what I can just say is it's interesting, Des, to think about like the back of the mind and the front of the mind, and also about kind of what you said about, you know, this like, you know, stoic belief, this like central stoic belief of focus on what you can influence and don't worry, never mind the things that you can't influence. And none of us in this room can influence ICE or Homeland Security, right? As much as we would potentially love to, right? And yet it is so front of mind for me, right? Like I wish it was permanently back of mind, but I am constantly enmeshed mentally and emotionally in political matters, and as they relate to my family, as they relate to my school, as they relate to our work, And so that's been a hard thing for me to navigate, just emotionally. I think as a leader, it's something that I find myself speaking to staff members and parents a lot. We've had situations and very similar in situations. So that's definitely very heavy on my mind. I want to just pause, Marco's, forgive me for forgetting your original prompt because I wanted to kind of go there, but
no, that was great. You have every right to go and do it. As you said, it's just the conversation. You really started to actually go about it. You have what's in the front of your mind, meaning as in like these types of things.
Yeah.
The back is saying like, those still questions that you have for your own building, that you're kind of some worries that you have going on that could come up or may come up that you're planning for just in case.
Yeah.
Like, we all know that we have to go and look at those pieces because we want to make sure that we can adapt and we're ready in case something ever goes. And we're not even talking about I won't say the most egregious, but when you think of those things that we don't want to ever have happen in our buildings, but we know that in the culture and the climate that we're in right now with things like, there are some things like we just talked about, like students being afraid. But you also have to I'm thinking about even any other situations that could be coming up.
Yeah.
For you guys specifically, being with students from lottery system to go in or not, when you find that you are short and now your budget's changing and now you're determining on how many staff members, like that is those adaptions that have to happen from that point.
Yeah.
Like for Jamie, the fact of like when a staff member out of nowhere a week before school starts is like, hey, I'm not coming back this year. And that staff member might have been teaching 3 specific classes that you absolutely need to cover. Like, how are we preparing for these types of things just to be, to stay calm, collective, and make sure we're moving through?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about as this conversation's been happening is the idea of like, existential safety, right, for our students, but also how that kind of transcends into what makes an environment safe and comfortable for learning and for teaching to happen. So it becomes a question, of that consistency. When you can plan for something, then you can create a level of consistency in how it unfolds or how you address it. But when you don't have the ability to impact it, then you're reactive, and that you lose consistency when that happens. So one of the big things that, we've been hearing about as administrators, I'm sure across the board since COVID, is how hard the job of being an educator is. And it seems to get harder every year. And I think that one of the things that I really consider and try to embed in whatever next steps we're taking as a school are, what is the through line to our work, to our mission, and also how is this consistent with our practices? How are we growing instead of just grabbing at kind of the next shiny object? How are we continuing to progress in a way that's predictable so that it creates a confidence that what we're doing isn't somehow new or this novel approach? It's rather continuing to develop and hone a set of skills and beliefs and strategies over time. I think that that's something that I think a lot about with our teachers, our support staff, but also how that translates to a student's experience, where you have folks who are comfortable and feel that they are agents of their own process, and how that translates to the student experience and the growth that a student can have in that kind of a setting.
I like the way you put that, because I think of the activity of the whole, are you a surviving, a striving, or a thriving school? Because you look at those components of it, because you can do great work and still be just surviving, because you have nothing prepared to make sure that there is the growth and there's change actually occurring, because it could be components of people and things like that. So if they disappear, all of a sudden that whole thing falls apart. It's looking at those parts to it. I think of when you say that, when, we think of the world, it's like everything is so much for education, which it is. We do ask staff, we ask ourselves, we ask support staff to do many, many things. But sometimes I think about it, it's because we look at it as a multitude of different things on the plate rather than they all connect. And I think of like, when you work on one piece, it will then affect the next piece to be more successful. And you think of the next. So if you build the classroom environment, you build the school environment as a culture of positivity, and I'm not saying it's going to be everyone walks in, skipping, loving each other, holding hands, but there's a belief that I belong in this building.
Mm-hmm.
Now kids are coming. So you're decreasing your attendance aspects. You didn't have to worry about the attendance issue anymore that you have to make sure of because you built it. So now they're willing to come to that bar. Then you think of the fact that if you're building that same exact environment, there's vulnerability. There's vulnerability. That means students and staff both are willing to grow and learn, which means the academic side can start to grow, which also means the disciplinary side is going to start to drop because we are not communicating in actions. Instead, we're able to work with each other and find that. And I think that's that component that sometimes we all lose when we have these conversations because we want to validate the fact that there is a lot asked.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's because we spend a lot of time looking at it as in it's a multitude of little things rather than it's one big thing altogether that we have to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I pose a question that I think is kind of like within the center of all of this? So, so let me try to tie this together. Let me hope that I can do this, right? So, couple sections ago, we were kind of talking about things that we can control versus that we can't control,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, in other words, there's disruptive forces that are going on that are going to impact what we do in our school building.
Mm-hmm.
Jamie, you talked a minute ago about like thinking about how your school thinks about both success, what people are to be doing, how people are to be thinking about this. We kind of talked about the political aspects, and we talked about like ICE and Homeland Security and that kind of element of safety. Another disruptive force that I'm just really thinking about a lot is how AI is going to change schools.
Mm-hmm.
And I one of the things that I think I and most educators are not ready for is the fact that I think that this is going to radically, I think it probably already has, just radically fundamentally change what teaching and learning looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly I think it's already completely turned on top of its head how students do work. I think that the traditional ways of students doing work has effectively sailed. I think for me, actually, it's already radically changed how I do my work. Mm-hmm. And so that's something I'm also curious about, right? Is when I think about this disruptive force, I'm also kind of curious about how all of you are adapting to that.
Well, we know with our district that we're trying to embrace it at this time period. We're really looking at it, diving into it, seeing the programs and how they can support. I've actually been reading a book about AI and actually it's work with, or I should say work with, but it's conflicts with equity.
Yeah.
And one of the things it talks about, though, in the book, which I thought was pretty fascinating, because I actually didn't think of it this way. When we talk about AI and we think about it as like plagiarism, that kids are cheating by using it. Well, technically, it's not something that's copied from it because it's a computer that's writing. It's not a human being that's written it.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, you're putting all information into this yourself to get the information out of what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. So in the end, the individual that's doing this is still putting in the information to create. They're looking at it. It's not having someone else write it for them, but in the same exact time, it is making it more fluent on how it looks. So the fact of the matter, it posed the question of, is it really cheating then if it's not that format? Should we be saying kids are being plagiarizing with it? Which it makes you think about it. Now, granted, everyone's going to have their point of view on it, so I'm not saying that it is or isn't, but I just thought it made me try to think about AI in a different format. Yeah. Than what we look at, where a lot of people look at it and automatically feel all it is going to make kids do the work and they're not going to do it and they're not going to do it anymore. It's like, when you hear the same statement of like, well, everyone uses spell check now, so we don't have to learn how to spell because when we write on our Chromebooks, we automatically do that, which is true. But then we think about things become obsolete in the end. And it's not saying that should be obsolete, but it's like the fact of the matter is components we use, calculators.
Right.
We all have to use calculator. We were all in a time period where all we had was a normal calculator. And when the first Texas Instrument came out, we spent most of our time spelling inappropriate words with it and showing it to our friends. But then now we understand it's a complete component of math. If we don't have it, you can't do half it. And even our standardized tests have kids use it.
Mhm.
So it's like you think about the growing piece of it. I think with what you're saying, I think that's going to be that next step, is that we have to embrace
Right.
and understand it's what it is and adapt to it and figure out how to use it in those positive formats.
Yeah, I think the challenge that folks are having from an educational perspective is when you use a calculator, when you use a spell check, you can still show your work, right? You can see the thinking that's happening behind the answer. The scary thing with AI is that there doesn't have to be any thinking behind it, right? You can plug in the most basic prompt and get some kind of a result. That's super challenging as you navigate educational systems that move more and more towards a mastery approach, because you're looking for students to give evidence of their learning, their skills, their thinking, and they have a vehicle now to just jump over all of that and hand you something that isn't their work.
Mhm.
And so, I think that there's, regardless of whether you like AI or hate AI or are ambivalent to it, it's here and it's not going away, right? That toothpaste is out of the tube. So teaching people to use it as a tool appropriately is the next step, just like we teach any skills, just like we teach how to use calculators or how to use word processors or G Suite or whatever. And it was just 2 years ago, we actually revised our student handbook so that the idea of plagiarism isn't the only aspect that we're concerned about. It's also academic dishonesty. So what we are looking for is an honest representation of students' work so that we have a belief that what we are assessing is an accurate portrayal of where that student is at that time.
One of my colleagues said the other day that AI is the new hammer. What he meant was that it is a tool that we are going to have to use. Right. And he gave the example of building a house. You need more than a hammer to build a house, but try to build a house without a hammer. Right. And so this has been a really interesting ongoing conversation with me and at my school, because we are a computer science school. We are huge on teaching coding. And what we're learning is AI will write the code for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are at a crossroad where we're having very real conversations on, should we continue to teach coding, right? Should we continue to focus on spelling when there is a tool that will spell check for you, right? Mm-hmm. Should we continue to teach coding, knowing that we can ask AI to write the code for us, and then tweak through telling AI, remove this piece and add this function over and over and over again, and it will keep improving the code to do the thing that you're trying to create. And so I don't know the answer right now. I don't want to waste my students' time teaching them something that may be obsolete. What I know is that whatever AI exists right now, this is the worst it's ever going to be. Right? Like it is going to keep improving.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a 9th grader show up day 1. What am I teaching this 9th grader to prepare them for year 4? And so that's where we are, because 4 years ago, I don't think we knew this. Like, I think we had an idea that something was in the works, but I don't think we recognized it was going to be this good. And to know that, like, the advancements that have been made in just a few years, what's another 10 years gonna bring about for us? And that has been the biggest piece of, is this model of school necessary? Is teaching coding, which is the basics of everything that we're doing, is this the right move now, or should we be doing something else? And what is the right thing to teach as the basics, so that no matter what comes down the line, students can adapt and change? And that's really what we're focusing on now.
Do you need coding, though, to be able to understand when coding needs to get changed? I'm just trying to think of it almost like in the same format of, like, do you need to know how to do, going back to our original, just the example of, like, do I need to know how to spell to find out if basically the spell check is giving me the correct word, or it changes the word completely to the wrong word in there because it changed my spelling, which was wrong, to something closer to the word, but that's not the word I was looking for.
Right.
Duck.
So here,
There it is. Yes.
couple of directions, right?
Yeah.
But so think back to, I don't even remember which episode it was. I spent a summer teaching kids to swim when I couldn't swim, right? So I don't know that if a kid has to understand all the intricacies of coding, if they need to be, or if they are required to be able to look at a code, find the error in the code and fix the code, when you can copy and paste it into something and say, find the error or find what is stopping this from being the outcome, and that thing will find it for them. I do think that we need people who understand coding at a basic level. So, when the computers revolt against us, we need to be able to go in and turn them off.
Listen, that's why I always say please and thank you to it whenever it fixes something for me on ChatGPT. I'm like, please do this, or thank you.
You stay polite, right?
Listen, just in case that day happens, I go, remember when I told you thank you?
When I went into Harford High, again, like 2008, there was everybody there was very proud of the fact that there was a photo development lab, right? You guys might know about this, right? So there was a lab, a dark room is what it was called, right? And so it was like, oh, we've got a dark room and we've got the machines and we've got the chemicals. And so if the kids want to take photos and develop the photos by hand the old-fashioned way, they can do that. And it's really important for kids to know this, because now they understand where photography came from, and they understand more about the light and the aperture and how cameras work and where all of this came from. And I had a friend who was at that time, like an acquaintance, who was a professional photographer and who was at that time making a lot of money as a professional photographer. She actually went to Harford Public High School, and I remember asking her, should we teach this? Like, should we teach kids darkroom and this kind of style of photography? She said, absolutely not. It's a complete waste. That world is gone. That world is dead. Move forward. Right? Now, I think similar to like what you said, Des, is that doesn't mean that some people shouldn't know it. Right? Right? That doesn't mean, right? So I think now about like doctors and the way doctors are using AI for both diagnostics, for medicine prescribing, the way in which AI is being used for really sound decision making, the way in which AI is being used to just like really kind of look very like heavily and very closely at what's going on with a person. But of course, doctors need to understand how to look into a microscope and look at cells and understand cell biology and so on. So I think that one of the things that is just something that we and schools and the education apparatus in general are going to need to figure out is when and who and how and under what sort of programs should people learn the deep, detailed, like underpinnings of how something is made up, right? Versus who now needs to learn this type of coding? Who needs to know Python? Who needs to know Java coding? Who need, like, you know, or should you be moving forward with ChatGPT 5, right, et cetera? Because, you know, I think that's a real thing.
Yeah, I think it's really what we have to constantly look at. And I think of that format, the example of the dark room, I think is a perfect example of it. I also think of, like, when we were at Hartford, we had the observatory
Right.
that wasn't being used anymore. It's like you had this giant facility inside of it that was, when you opened a secret door, you found it because it had never been updated, never been used, because it went away, because they weren't teaching astronomy anymore in classes. It became obsolete in their mindset.
Yeah.
So,
And it needed like $100,000 fix, and
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
When you
finding
think of
that.
those things, it's like, I think you are right on that. It's like, at what point do we need to walk away from the past and move into the future? We
And I-
did it during COVID, like when we finally made everyone chose, and like, I think we all forget about it. It wasn't that long ago. It was about 5 years ago when finally everyone moved to doing either Google Drives or Microsoft 360. Like, everyone finally made the full jump to that, because I remember being in a PD with some of you guys, and we were looking at Schoology, was like just showing it. I'm like, what is this thing? Like, why do we have to go online to go and find like all the information? Couldn't we just looked at it, like, can they just give it to us like we normally have it? But you think about how quickly we adapt, change, and move to something else.
Mhm.
And is that the next step for us?
So let me ask this, because, and I'll give my example, but what is the most surprising way that you have used AI? Right. And I'll give my example. So when planning, let's say, quote unquote, controversial professional learning, I have taken to asking, like, AI to pretend to be a, you know, this type of person, right? Someone who is hesitant to change, someone who is resistant to accepting new models, someone who is a late adapter, and give me feedback on this presentation. And that way I am like preparing for the potential, not argument, but the potential pushback that I may receive. And so I am prepared and not caught off guard as much, right? By what could come back at me. And that was just like, I just was like, I wonder if it can do this. It can.
ChatGPT, please help me tone my presentation down 75% for anybody who's suffering from extreme white fragility, right? And it'll do that, right? And, but no, it's
It's
real.
the percentage for me.
But
Oh, I'm okay with 75%.
Yeah,
that's the threshold. Right?
the interesting thing to show that is we actually had just learned that in professional learning. Like, they actually just did that for us, not that specific thing you're doing. What they did was that we went through and they showed us, like, told us, put our, like, you know, our continuous learning plans in. Here's the rubric. Put the rubric in for it. It will check to see if you're aligned with the rubric.
Yeah.
If you're not aligned, with it, it'll do like the double checking for
Yeah.
you.
Mhm.
And it did like those pieces. But I will tell you, I found two. It makes mistakes also on purpose, which I found interesting.
Hallucinates, right?
It like literally does. So like we were making like a image one, and we'd given what it needed to do, and it did it. But then it started making errors in the writing of it to see if even if you're paying attention to it, to kind of go through. And you have to explain, I need you to rewrite them out. Like, so when it does this information first, which I think is gonna be one of the pitfalls for kids with it, is that it will sometimes give you resources to click on, but it's fake resources that it made up itself. Or
That's what
it has false information in there that you have to go back and review, edit, and revise to make sure that you did it right.
So I used ChatGPT as a learning tool with my son, who had a question in math. And so I showed him how he could input the problem into ChatGPT, and it didn't just give him an answer. It also gave him the step-by-step of how to solve it. So then we went through and did the step-by-step together so he could practice it and see how it worked. he ended up getting an answer different from the answer that ChatGPT provided. So we then put in, we got this answer, but you gave this answer, and we checked our work and got the same answer. So, we were pretty sure that it was accurate, or we were making a consistent mistake. ChatGPT actually responded, I used a different way of solving it than this. So your answer is actually closer to the actual answer than what I gave you.
I think that's a really important example. And so, Des, I don't have I've been thinking, your question was like, what are some unexpected ways in which you've used AI that like made you think differently, right? And I'm kind of thinking about that question. But the main thing that I really think now is that AI is like my partner, right? Like AI is now part of how I work. I'm using it with a lot of writing. It's I now, when I write letters of recommendation, they now take me 15% of the time they used to take, because I've uploaded the entire catalog of hundreds of letters of recommendation that I've written over the years, and it knows my style, it knows the way I speak, it knows my, right? So that kind of goes back to this issue of whose words are these, right? Jamie, the way you're talking about it is like, this now is serving almost like a tutor, right? Like almost like a guide. So the reason I kind of pivoted to this topic of AI at one point was simply because I also saw it as this unpredictable disruptive force, right? So, something else that, we not only can we not control, we might not be able to predict, right? So I'm thinking kind of at the same time as like, what is Project 2025 going to lead to in American schools? Is Title I going to be completely gone? Is IDEA and 504 and any civil rights enforcement whatsoever going to be completely ripped from the structure of American education? And what the heck should we be teaching these kids? Because the entire sum of human knowledge is now accessible within 3 seconds to anybody. And there's these questions about how do we teach these things and how do we learn these things? And I think like increasingly, if we rest on our laurels and if we operate schools the way we have been for many years, I think it's going to be harder and harder to pivot when these quick changes come to us. Interestingly enough, COVID kind of taught us that. Right? Like we had no choice when COVID happened, but to make some of the pivots that we did. And the question is, did we learn lessons from that? Right.
And we didn't, because we fought tooth and nail to get back to normal.
Right.
Right. Like people actually use the term get back to normal. And we didn't stop and remind ourselves
to grow.
We didn't like normal. We wanted to get away from normal.
Yeah.
We have been fighting to get away from normal. And now we're saying, let's just go back to what we know didn't work because it was more comfortable.
It's comfortable. It's something that we know. Our society functions on the back of a school day schedule and a school year schedule. Whether you're in a school system or not, your year is affected by whether kids are in school or kids aren't in school.
Right.
Your day is impacted by when buses are on the road or not on the road, or when you need to arrange childcare or not arrange childcare, or whether you can work from home or if you have to go into the office. Our entire society is structured on the back of this system.
Right.
So not only do you have to think about the existential aspects of what is the purpose of school in a post-AI world, in the social political context that we exist in right now, where we don't know if in 6 months there will be a Department of Education, then you have to say to yourself, and then what happens to the rest of the structures that rely on it, right? Because education is a foundation for that, but it's been built to be a foundation for that. Right? It serves other masters, right? It keeps people out of the workforce so that older people can stay in the workforce. It does certain things socially, politically, and those questions all have to be asked simultaneous to what's the purpose.
Yeah. And I think increasingly the question is going to be asked for whom.
Yeah.
So for example, the Project 2025's aim is to completely undo the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, right? And to say children with disabilities should be schooled elsewhere, right? I don't think that it is histrionics. I don't think it's extreme to be, I'm a parent of kids with disabilities. Like, I am concerned about concentration camp like elements being created as educational alternatives for kids with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
The equity implications of this, like specifically the racial equity, the hard fought gains that were made through the civil rights movement and the ongoing civil rights movement are literally being heavily undermined. It's a massive paradox. Just like you said before, these are, we so often think of schools as accurately so as historical forces of oppression and holding communities down and not working towards the mobilization and the upward mobility, especially of marginalized communities and communities of color. And yet now I feel like our system is what we have to fight for and preserve and so on. And it's this time period where it's just like, wow, how do we improve from here? Well, it's like, first we have to survive, or first we have to defend ourselves first. These are the kind of the things on my mind.
And a year, maybe 2 years ago, we would have said what you're saying is just hyperbole. Like, you are just stoking fear, right? Like, there's absolutely no way anyone would ever do that to a kid with special needs, even though historically that is what happened to kids with special needs, right? But then you say the same thing about, you never just take over a city. Oh, wait.
Yeah, right.
Right. This thing would never, you wouldn't dismantle the Department of Education.
The National Guard aren't a police force.
Right? No, that would never happen until it is happening. Right. And that goes back to how do you plan for that? Right. And there's a way, right? I mean, we do have to be strategic, right? We do have to think in these worst case scenarios and not necessarily stoke fear in people, but have plans ready, right? We some of our safety plans take into account the most, some might think ridiculous things that could happen in a school, except there are some schools where those things happen, right? And it's ridiculous until it happens in your school and you're not prepared for it. And so we do have to prepare for those things. We do have to accept that there are things happening now that in the last 30, 40, maybe 50 years, we would not have thought this is going to happen in a school, near a school, and right in our country. But they are, and we've got to take that into consideration.
Absolutely.
Well, Matt, I think that goes to back to that point that from way back at the beginning is that idea of safety, that idea of consistency, right? And when we think about, one of the most foundational elements that we all learn about in education in our first ed class, Maslow's hierarchy of need, and we talk about safety being bedrock and foundational to any kind of educational practice or journey to self-actualization. When you talk about disruptive forces, when you talk about the sociopolitical context that we're in, when you talk about any of these things, the question is, how can you plan effectively to engender a belief that folks are safe and then able to self-actualize or on that path to that? And there's all kinds of nuance and context to that question based on a person's neurotypicity, race, gender, identification, all of that. Different people feel different levels of safety in these environments all the time. The question is, now, are we at a tipping point where there's so many people feeling less safe? That's the thing that I wonder.
And sadly, I think that's part of the point, right? Just like the point was to make your student feel unsafe,
Mhm.
right? The point is the trauma. The point is the terror. The point is we don't want you in this country. We want you to leave or be taken out, right? And so the point is make you feel terrified. We want the news to show what's going on in these camps in the thing in Florida that I'd rather not name. They want people to know the harsh conditions. They want people to know that people are being bound and behind their hands and being forced to eat like dogs in these facilities, right? The point is the terror. The point is to hijack people's limbic systems to the point where they say it is not safe here, right? And yeah.
And that is where I will own that at my school, and I will take, as a leader, I failed my student by not creating a place that had enough joy and safety that my student felt protected, because my student knows me, right?
Yeah.
My student doesn't necessarily know the people who are saying this bad thing can happen. And so I needed to create a safer, more joyful place for that student, so that student would feel I can go to this place because I feel safe.
Do you think that up against the possibility of ICE coming to your school to take a student out of it, there is any system that you could create that would give that feeling of safety and joy that would outweigh the fear of ICE showing up at an institution?
I'll answer that by saying I know for a fact that I didn't. I hope that through my employment, and I hope through my advocacy outside of my employment, that I'm able to help positively impact and change the tide of students feeling that way.
Mhm.
I know for a fact that to date I have not. And I mean, I don't know that very many communities have people who have, but I know that history has shown us that it's going to take us, right? It's not an individual. Everybody wants you to believe that it's an individual that does it. It's not, right? It is a group of well-planned, strategic people, but we have not reached that place yet. And the people who are sowing chaos took the time to plan this out, right? They planned it. They told us what they were going to do. And
Published it.
And we said, and so many people, I'm not going to say we, I'm not putting myself in this one. But so many people said, no way, it'll never happen.
Yeah, because nobody in the history of the world has ever published a book about what they were going to do to destroy a society and then acted upon that. Oh, wait.
Yeah, right.
Well, guys, we've been at it for quite some time. We probably could have continued to still have this conversation for even quite a bit longer. Any final words you'd like to say?
I think Des kicked us off by saying that we're the Bourbon Brothers. And this is what happens when there's no bourbon involved. So
the conversation gets a little bit deeper if we go a little bit later into the evening.
That's a fact. Yeah. That's a fact.
I'll just say that I wish we've all known each other. Either, Des, I've only known you for about 4 years now, right? About 4 or 5 years now. But we all, in some fashion, have all known each other for quite a while. I think it's very, safe to say that we are all very much in one another's corners as school administrators, as men, as friends, etc., as fathers, etc. And I just hope each of you gentlemen has a fantastic school year. I hope that, the things that you have in front of you right now, with your staffs and with students coming in, and then the things that are going to happen throughout this whole school year, I hope that you can stay on your surfboard and ride those waves no matter what may come.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for me, I'm just thinking about the fact of having the privilege of getting a chance to continue to speak with guys like you. I think for our years of being able to work with each other, and then the spanning out of even the individuals you get to meet along the way and you talk with, and it's think how important it is to have that, to be able to continue to talk with individuals that you worked with in prior years, you work with now, because you can have these types of conversations when you're frustrated, when you're confused, when you need that support to try and get a little deeper into some of the topics that we're going through. And when AI can't help you on those situations, you want to have another voice that's going through it too. And I just think of this is a privilege to be able to sit down and talk with you guys and go through that, because I think it really helps a lot of times going through some of the situations that are out there and hearing just point of views and getting a chance at things that maybe not everyone in your buildings, everyone in your district may feel the same way about. It gets you an opportunity to kind of see and think about it from other perspectives.
We have to remember that public education has gone through iterations. If we go back to Thomas Jefferson said the point of public education was to, let me get this right, was to scrape coals from the rubbish that is society. Right, to find treasures in the trash, essentially. And that was the mindset until who's known as Horseman, known as the father of modern education, said that the point of public education is to be the great equalizer of the social machinery. I think we are at a point where we have to recommit to being that great equalizer. And that means that, we like-minded educators need to come together and say, regardless of political beliefs, regardless of all these other things, this is why we became educators. This is what education is about. We are here to educate children. And in order to educate them, we have to make them feel safe. They have to feel protected. And until we're able to do that, we're fighting an uphill battle. But I do feel some level of optimism when I sit around with Bourbon Bros, when I sit around with the administrators in my current district, and administrators in previous districts who are passionate about the work, who are going to do the things and are going to support the kiddos and are going to support the teachers who are quote unquote front line with the kiddos. And that makes me feel much better and helps pump me up to get out there every day and make sure that we are doing the necessary work.
And thanks for the invitation, because this is not something that we get to do all that often. And to have the opportunity to just sit down and take the time and make the time is refreshing.
All right. Well, with that, guys, school's out.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You all will be missed. Until then, I gotta blow you a kiss. Until we meet again on that other side, this my rhyme. We all love you to the end of this time, always. Know this, you all will be missed. Until then, I gotta blow you a kiss. Until we meet again on that other side, this my rhyme. We all love you to the end of this time, always.